Tonight we continue this wonderful tradition of learning from our members during our summertime services. And tonight our teacher is Shelley Hebert. I was surprised to learn you've been members only since 2017, is that correct? Having met you in the spaces throughout our congregation, your comfort and presence and leadership, I thought you had been here for a lot longer. But Shelley might be relatively new to our community, but she's not new to our larger community here in Palo Alto and Los Altos. She's been an active board leader and executive in our local community for 30 years. Currently, she is co-president of Stanford's first Jewish Alumni Network. She's a member of the Jewish Theological Seminary Advisory Board, and most importantly, I think, she'll be teaching the third year of the philosophy minyan at Beth-Am this fall. So I urge you to learn with her, and please, Shelley, we're eager to learn with you tonight.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm honored to be here to share some words of Torah this evening on the Shabbat of my beloved father's yahrzeit. And so I would like to dedicate these thoughts to his memory and also in loving memory of Jacob Steinberg. Within this week's Torah portion, Parsha Pinchas is a well-known story that involves a father and daughters. The Torah tells us that when Zelophehad died, he had 5 daughters, but no sons. According to the practice of the time, only males were eligible to receive an inheritance, in this case, the land of Canaan that would be apportioned among the children of Israel. The Torah recounts that the daughters appeared before Moses, the priests, and all who had gathered at the tent of meeting to argue that they were their father's rightful heirs. Not only did the daughters prevail, but after conferring with God, who agreed with the daughters, Moses changes the laws of inheritance, and henceforth, daughters as well as sons will be eligible to inherit. What I want to consider this evening, however, is not what happened after the daughters spoke, but what may have come before. How did these young women develop the clarity, courage, and critical thinking skills to advocate on their own behalf? What made them believe that their voices would be heard? How did they know that to be persuasive, they would need to make a compelling case and collaborate to present it clearly together? And so I want to reflect on the relationship between Zelophehad and his children and the lessons that it may hold for all fathers and daughters. The Torah tells us that Zelophehad was a descendant of Manasseh. And who was Manasseh? He was a son of Joseph and the grandson of the patriarch Jacob. But perhaps most significantly in this context, Manasseh and his brother Ephraim are the 2 siblings mentioned in the traditional Shabbat blessing of sons when we say, "May you be like Ephraim and Manasseh." Many commentators, such as Rashi and Samson Raphael Hirsch, have offered explanations for why we read in Genesis chapter 48, verse 20, that Jacob blessed them that day, saying, "By you shall Israel bless." One of the most often cited explanations is that Ephraim and Manasseh were the first brothers in the biblical story whose relationship was one of peace and acceptance. They did not fight with each other, even after their grandfather Jacob favored the younger Ephraim over the older Manasseh as he gave his final blessing. Perhaps as a descendant of Manasseh, Zelophehad had raised his own daughters to get along with each other, just as Ephraim and Manasseh did, avoiding the sibling strife and rivalries that were so painful in the lives of earlier generations. Another possible reflection of this important shift in family relationships can be found in the name Zelophehad. One of several meanings in the etymology of this Hebrew name is that it represents a rupture or a break. In this case, breaking destructive inherited patterns of family discord. Even today, we know that contentious issues of inheritance can lead to permanent rupture in sibling relationships. Zelophehad's death presents a test on many levels. I like to think he was a father who had instilled the confidence in his daughters to seek justice. He recognized and acknowledged their intellects and abilities, just as my father did for me. For all the fathers who are here tonight and online, I hope that this unusual Torah story reminds us that the true legacy of a father is much more than land or material wealth. It is an inheritance that lives inside a daughter and is manifest in how she sees herself and her potential impact, not only on Jewish community life, but on the world. The names of Zelophehad's female children are listed twice in the Torah text: Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. Both their father and we understand that they were 5 unique individuals, as well as siblings who were able to unite and act together as a family. A father also transmits to his daughter attitudes towards other female family members. When my father was in his 80s, on a Shabbat evening much like this in New Orleans, he gave a talk at Temple Sinai about the 3 women who had the greatest impact on his life. One of them was his grandmother, Shema Chafetz, for whom I was named. I knew nothing about my great-grandmother, however, until a life-changing email arrived in my inbox 4 years ago this month from the DNA testing company, 23andMe. I had never heard of the person who sent the email, but quickly made a stunning discovery. A century ago, in a Russian town called Zhuravichy, I had a great uncle named Yitzhak Aaron, who was brutally murdered in a pogrom just after having Shabbat dinner with his family. His mother was my great-grandmother, Shema. At the time of the pogrom, she was already an elderly widow. Her son's murder left her alone with 3 of his young orphan children. Yet over the next few years, between 1920 to 23, she heroically fled with them out of what is now Belarus and across Eastern Europe in a time of war, epidemics, and a massive flow of traumatized, impoverished refugees to an America awash in anti-immigrant prejudice and politics. A century ago, in 1921, the US Congress passed the Immigration Restriction Act, for the first time placing numerical limits on immigration and creating a quota system for establishing those limits based on the number of residents from a particular country already in America. The US Census of 1910 was used to set the acceptable levels of increase for immigrants from Eastern Europe, who were the primary focus of the restrictions. Today, millions of women and children are refugees fleeing Ukraine, just as my great-grandmother did a century ago. With the help of Google Maps and amazing research archives accessible online, I mapped her harrowing journey with the children through places with names that today are painfully etched in all our hearts and minds: Kyiv, Chernigov, Warsaw, and more. And I've been able to meet members of this newly reconnected family for the first time, all sharing in the inheritance of freedom and opportunity that our courageous ancestor bequeathed to us. Today's digital Jewish genealogy tools can indeed lead to remarkable discoveries, but the importance of knowing our family history is already clear in the text of Parsha Pinchas. In chapter 26, God instructs Moses and Aaron's son Eleazar to take a census of the children of Israel. The text then details the members of numerous families and generations over 60 verses. The word for family, mishpacha, appears in these verses over 90 times. So a census is not just about a head count, it's about knowing our family history. The Torah is putting up a billboard to tell us that in addition to sharing the story of the Jewish people, we should also treasure, share, and preserve the stories of our individual families from generation to generation. If you haven't yet had the poignant experience of finding US Census records of your own ancestors, even as far back as 1910, today all you need is your computer and a few clicks to see them. What we as a Jewish community have inherited from all who came before us can strengthen and uplift us in these very difficult times. It is a legacy of perseverance, resilience, courage, fortitude, and faith. 23andMe may reveal our biological DNA, but in Torah, we encounter our spiritual DNA. The text of Parsha Pinchas tells us that the episode of Zelophehad's daughters took place, quote, after the plague. As we all hope for a time when we can truly say that we are after the plague of COVID and other traumas that continue to inflict so much pain and suffering in our times, we can strive to be like Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, using our intellects and wisdom, raising our voices, and making a difference now and in the future. This too is our inheritance. Shabbat Shalom.